If you encountered Irma Grese in Auschwitz, you would never forget her. These are the haunting words of a Holocaust survivor who witnessed her brutality firsthand. Irma Grese, a name synonymous with terror during the Holocaust, is etched in history as one of the most infamous female guards of Nazi concentration camps. Known as the Hyena of Auschwitz, her sadistic actions contributed to the unimaginable suffering of countless prisoners. But how did a young girl from a small German village transform into one of the most feared women of the Third Reich? In today's video, we delve into the dark and disturbing biography of Irma Grese, exploring her early life, her indoctrination into Nazi ideology, her rise to infamy in the camps, and her eventual downfall. This is a chilling tale of power, hatred, and the devastating consequences of radicalization. Irma Ida Ilse Grese was born on October 7, 1923, in a small village called Reschen, located in the northeastern part of Germany. The Grese family was a typical rural, working-class household. Her father, Alfred Grese, was a dairy worker known for his strict, authoritarian nature. Irma's mother, Berta Grese, struggled with depression and tragically took her own life in 1936 when Irma was just 13 years old. This traumatic event would be one of the early defining moments in Irma's life, leaving a deep emotional scar and contributing to her increasingly detached and hardened demeanor. In the 1930s, Germany was a nation in turmoil. The economic depression, combined with the political upheaval of the Weimar Republic, made the country fertile ground for radical ideologies. As Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party rose to power, their propaganda machine targeted Germany's youth, aiming to mold them into loyal followers of the Third Reich. Irma, like many young girls of her time, joined the League of German Girls, Bund Deutscher Mädel or BEM, the female wing of the Hitler Youth. The BEM was more than just a youth organization. It was an indoctrination tool designed to instill Nazi ideologies of racial purity, loyalty to the Führer, and the role of women as supporters of the Aryan race. Here, young Irma learned to idolize Hitler and internalize the party's doctrines. Her father, a staunch supporter of the Nazi regime, encouraged her involvement, believing it would provide her with a sense of purpose and direction. Despite her involvement in the BEM, Irma struggled in her teenage years. She dropped out of school at the age of 15, lacking both academic interest and aptitude. She initially aspired to become a nurse, a profession promoted by the Nazi regime as ideal for women. However, her application was rejected, possibly due to her lack of education and skills. This rejection marked a turning point, leaving her frustrated and searching for a place where she could assert power and authority. During this period, the Nazi Party was expanding its network of concentration camps, and the demand for guards, especially female ones, was growing. For young women like Irma, the SS Schutzstaffel offered an opportunity to rise in status and escape the limitations of rural life. It was an environment where obedience, loyalty, and a lack of empathy were valued above all else. In 1939, at the age of 16, Irma Grese took her first steps into this dark path, starting as a dairy helper while seeking opportunities within the SS ranks. The years of indoctrination had set the stage for what she would become a loyal instrument of the Nazi regime, willing to commit unspeakable atrocities in its name. By the late 1930s, the Nazi regime had solidified its grip on Germany. The expansion of its concentration camp system required a growing number of guards, including women. For Irma Grese, this was an opportunity to escape the monotony of her rural life and find a place where she could wield power. In 1939, at just 16 years old, Irma moved to the city of Ravensbrück to seek work. Ravensbrück was home to a notorious women's concentration camp, primarily used to train female SS guards. Irma was drawn to the SS, a force known for its unwavering loyalty to Hitler and its brutal enforcement of Nazi policies. Despite lacking formal education, she was eager to join the ranks of this elite unit. Enticed by the allure of authority and the ideology she had absorbed as a member of the League of German Girls, Irma began her training at Ravensbrück in 1942. The camp was infamous for its harsh conditions and the brutal methods used to instill discipline among the new recruits. Female guards were trained to be ruthless, viewing the prisoners not as people but as enemies of the state. The SS training program, was designed to strip away any semblance of empathy, replacing it with a cold, mechanical adherence to Nazi principles. The trainees were taught how to maintain order through violence, intimidation, and psychological manipulation. Whips, clubs, and even attack dogs were standard tools of the trade. They were instructed to use these instruments without hesitation, ensuring that prisoners remained fearful and compliant. Irma quickly adapted to this environment, exhibiting a disturbing zeal for the task she was assigned. Her supervisors noticed her eagerness and her willingness to enforce the camp's rules with extreme cruelty. During this time, Irma's ambition became evident. Despite the grueling nature of the training, she thrived in the camp's environment. Her dedication to the Nazi cause, combined with her apparent enjoyment of power over others, marked her as a standout trainee. In an organization that prized loyalty and obedience above all, she quickly gained the attention of her superiors. In December 1942, Irma Grese was selected for a position at Auschwitz-Birkenau, the largest of the Nazi death camps. This assignment was a significant step up from her initial training at Ravensbrück, placing her in a key role within the camp's brutal hierarchy. At just 19 years old, Irma was about to begin the darkest chapter of her life, one that would earn her a place in history as one of the most feared and reviled figures of the Holocaust. The stage was set for Irma Grese's rise within the SS ranks. The skills she had honed at Ravensbrück, intimidation, violence, and unflinching cruelty, would now be put to devastating use at Auschwitz. Her story was about to take a turn from indoctrination and training to active participation in one of the most horrific genocides in human history. Irma's responsibilities at Auschwitz included overseeing thousands of female prisoners in the women's camp section, known as Birkenau. Her presence was known to instill fear. She would patrol the barracks with a plighted whip in hand, ready to lash out at anyone she deemed disobedient. Survivors recounted her brutal beatings, often carried out without any provocation. She had a particular fondness for using her whip, which became a symbol of her reign of terror. One of the most terrifying aspects of Irma's role was her participation in the infamous selections. At Auschwitz, selections were conducted to determine which prisoners would be sent to the gas chambers. With a cold, calculating gaze, Irma would stand alongside doctors like Joseph Mengele, the angel of death, pointing out prisoners who appeared too weak or sick to work. For many, a single gesture from her was a death sentence. Her willingness to assist in these inhumane decisions highlighted the depths of her cruelty. Grese's relationship with Mengele became a dark partnership. The two shared a mutual fascination for power and control. Irma assisted Mengele with his sadistic medical experiments, which often involved torturous procedures conducted on prisoners without anesthesia. These experiments were part of the Nazis' twisted quest for scientific discovery, but they were nothing more than acts of barbarism. Irma's willingness to be involved in these experiments further solidified her status as one of the most feared figures in the camp. Beyond her role in the selection process and experiments, Irma's daily interactions with prisoners were marked by acts of sheer malice. Survivors described her as a beautiful monster with her blonde hair and youthful appearance juxtaposed against her heinous actions. She often used her looks to manipulate other guards and assert her dominance, solidifying her reputation as a sadistic figure who thrived on power. In 1944, as the war began to turn against the Nazis, the conditions in Auschwitz deteriorated even further. Food became scarcer, punishments more brutal, and Irma's behavior grew increasingly sadistic. By this time, she had become the Oberaufseherin, or senior female guard, giving her significant control over the female prisoners. Her cruelty knew no bounds. Reports detail her unleashing dogs on inmates, beating them until they were unrecognizable, and taking pleasure in their pain. The influence she wielded at Auschwitz was immense. Irma Grese had become a symbol of the dehumanizing effects of absolute power combined with radical indoctrination. In just a few short years, she had transformed from a rural farm girl into one of the most feared women in the entire Nazi concentration camp system. But as the tides of war began to shift, the once powerful Nazi regime was on the brink of collapse, and Irma's reign of terror was about to come to an end. The horrors of Auschwitz would soon come to light as Allied forces closed in. Irma Grese's actions, however, would not go unnoticed. The world was about to witness justice served for the countless atrocities she had committed as she was transferred to Bergen-Belsen, another camp that would seal her fate. By late 1944, the tides of World War II had shifted dramatically. The The Soviet Red Army was advancing from the east, pushing deep into Nazi-occupied territories. In a desperate attempt to conceal the atrocities committed at Auschwitz, the SS began evacuating the camp, forcing prisoners on deadly death marches to other concentration camps in Germany. During this chaotic period, Irma Grese was reassigned to another notorious concentration camp, Bergen-Belsen. Unlike Auschwitz, Bergen-Belsen was not originally a death camp, but a holding camp for political prisoners and those deemed too sick to work. However, as the war dragged on and more prisoners were transferred, the conditions at Bergen-Belsen worsened dramatically. The camp was severely overcrowded, food and medical supplies were scarce, and disease, particularly typhus, spread rapidly, claiming thousands of lives. When Irma Grese arrived at Bergen-Belsen in early 1945, she was appointed as one of the highest-ranking female guards, an Oberaufseherin. By this time, her reputation as a brutal overseer had preceded her. Despite the worsening conditions and the imminent collapse of the Nazi regime, Irma's behavior did not change. In fact, it grew even more vicious. Witnesses reported that she continued to beat prisoners mercilessly, often targeting the weakest and most vulnerable. Her signature whip, along with her pack of attack dogs, became a source of dread among the inmates. The living conditions at Bergen-Belsen were horrific. The prisoners, many of whom had survived death marches, were crammed into filthy barracks without proper sanitation, food, or medical care. As a result, typhus and other diseases spread like wildfire. The death toll rose daily, with bodies piling up faster than they could be buried. In this nightmarish environment, Irma Grese continued her reign of terror, showing no mercy to the suffering prisoners. By April 1945, the end of the war was near. The Allied forces were closing in on Germany from all sides. The British Army was advancing toward the region of Lower Saxony, where Bergen-Belsen was located. As the situation became increasingly dire, many SS officers fled, but Irma Grese chose to stay, perhaps out of a sense of loyalty to the Nazi cause or an unwillingness to face the consequences of her actions. On April 15, 1945, British forces liberated Bergen-Belsen. What they discovered was beyond horrific: tens of thousands of dead and dying prisoners, barely clinging to life. The camp had become a scene of utter despair, with emaciated survivors wandering aimlessly among the dead. The British soldiers, who were unprepared for the scale of the suffering they encountered, were horrified by what they saw. In the immediate aftermath of the liberation, British forces rounded up the remaining SS guards, including Irma Grese. Unlike some of her comrades who attempted to blend in with the prisoners or escape, Irma was quickly identified by the survivors. Her distinct appearance, tall, blonde, with an almost cold, unemotional expression, made her easily recognizable. Many prisoners came forward to accuse her of unspeakable atrocities. The Hyena of Auschwitz had finally been caught. Irma's capture marked the beginning of her downfall. The once powerful SS guard was now a prisoner herself, facing a reckoning for her crimes. For the survivors of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen, her arrest was a small but significant moment of justice amid the overwhelming grief and loss. The liberation of Bergen-Belsen was a turning point, not just in the war, but in the broader understanding of the Holocaust's horrors. Irma Grese, who had once wielded so much power and terror, was now just another prisoner, awaiting her fate as the world prepared to confront the full extent of the Nazi regime's crimes. The stage was set for one of the first major war crime trials in history, where Irma Grese would face her victims and answer for her role in the brutal machinery of the Holocaust. Following the liberation of Bergen-Belsen, the British Army swiftly moved to bring those responsible for the atrocities to justice. The first step in this process was the Belsen trial, one of the earliest war crimes tribunals held after World War II. The trial took place in Lüneburg, Germany, beginning in September 1945, with Irma Grese as one of the main defendants. Irma, along with 44 other SS guards and officials from Bergen-Belsen and Auschwitz, was charged with war crimes and crimes against humanity. The accused faced a list of horrific acts: the systematic torture, murder, and inhumane treatment of prisoners. Unlike many of her male counterparts who attempted to deny their involvement or blame their superiors, Irma Grese showed little remorse throughout the proceedings. The courtroom was filled with survivors eager to testify against the woman they called the Hyena of Auschwitz. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting stories of Irma's brutal beatings, her role in the selection process, and the sadistic pleasure she seemed to derive from inflicting pain. They described how she would unleash her dogs on prisoners, beat them mercilessly with her whip, and torment them with psychological and physical abuse. One survivor recalled Irma's chilling smile as she selected prisoners for the gas chambers, while another testified about her involvement in Josef Mengele's gruesome experiments. The accounts were harrowing, painting a clear picture of a young woman who had fully embraced the barbaric cruelty of the Nazi ideology. Irma's youth and attractive appearance contrasted starkly with the monstrous acts she had committed, making her one of the most infamous figures on trial. Throughout the trial, Irma maintained a cold, detached demeanor, rarely showing any signs of emotion. She denied many of the accusations, claiming she was simply following orders and had no control over the larger atrocities occurring in the camps. However, her defense was weak against the overwhelming evidence and eyewitness testimonies. The prosecution argued that her actions went far beyond merely following orders. She had exhibited a zealous enthusiasm for her role, taking pleasure in the suffering of others. The British prosecutors emphasized that Irma's role in the camps was not a passive one. Her sadistic behavior, her voluntary participation in the selection process, and her use of torture as a means of control were highlighted as clear examples of her willingness to commit crimes against humanity. Irma's lack of remorse during the trial only solidified her image as a ruthless perpetrator of Nazi terror. On November 17, 1945, the verdict was announced. Irma Grese was found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to death by hanging. She was one of only 3 women sentenced to death at the Belsen trial. The sentence reflected the gravity of her actions and the immense suffering she had caused. The decision was met with relief by the survivors, who had endured years of terror under her watch. For many, her conviction was a small step towards justice, a chance to see one of their tormentors held accountable. The execution was scheduled for December 13, 1945. As the day approached, Irma Grese maintained her stoic demeanor, reportedly showing little fear or remorse. Even in her final moments, she did not plead for mercy or express regret for her actions. When asked if she had any final words, she simply responded, "Schnell," which means quickly in German, a chilling end for a woman who had inflicted so much pain on others without a moment's hesitation. On the morning of December 13, 1945, Irma Grese was executed at the age of 22, making her one of the youngest women ever to be hanged for war crimes. Her death marked the end of a brief but horrifying career within the Nazi concentration camp system. For many, her execution symbolized a measure of justice, but it could never undo the suffering she had caused. The Belsen trial and the execution of figures like Irma Grese were significant moments in the post-war reckoning with the Holocaust. They set a precedent for holding individuals accountable for crimes against humanity, regardless of their rank or role. The trial forced the world to confront the sheer scale of cruelty and the capacity for inhumanity that the Nazi regime had embodied. Irma Grese's legacy remains a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked power and radical indoctrination. Her story is a testament to the horrors that can arise when hate is allowed to flourish, and when individuals choose cruelty over compassion. As we look back on the history of the Holocaust, the tale of Irma Grese serves as a haunting warning of the depths to which humanity can sink, and a call to remember the victims who suffered under her reign. Irma Grese's life and actions during World War II leave behind a chilling legacy. As a young woman who quickly rose through the ranks of the Nazi SS, she became a symbol of the ruthless and sadistic elements of the Nazi concentration camp system. Her story, however, is not one of a leader or a strategic mastermind, but rather of a person who willingly embraced the Nazi regime's brutal ideologies and contributed to its horrific execution. Irma Grese's name has become synonymous with the worst aspects of human nature: the capacity for cruelty, the ease with which one can be swept up in radical ideologies, and the depths of depravity that can arise when power is given without accountability. Her transformation from a rural farm girl to a notorious concentration camp guard highlights the powerful influence of propaganda, indoctrination, and the allure of power, especially in a time of war and chaos. The atrocities committed by Irma Grese and others like her have left a permanent scar on human history. The testimonies of survivors from Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen serve as a crucial reminder of the suffering endured by millions during the Holocaust. These stories keep the memory of the victims alive and offer a sobering reflection on the consequences of unchecked hate and prejudice. In the decades following her execution, Irma Grese has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and studies aimed at understanding how an ordinary young woman could become a perpetrator of such heinous crimes. Historians, psychologists, and sociologists have examined her life in an attempt to understand the factors that led to her transformation. Was it a product of the extreme indoctrination and propaganda she was exposed to? Or did her actions reveal a deeper, inherent cruelty? These questions continue to be explored as part of a broader effort to understand the psychology of perpetrators and genocides. Today, Irma Grese is often used as an example in Holocaust education to illustrate the dangers of radicalization and the capacity for ordinary individuals to commit extraordinary evil. Her story serves as a powerful lesson on the importance of remembering history so that such atrocities are never repeated. Educational initiatives and memorials around the world continue to preserve the memory of the Holocaust victims, ensuring that the horrors experienced under the Nazi regime are not forgotten. The legacy of Irma Grese is not one of heroism or honor, but of infamy and horror. She is remembered as a warning, a cautionary tale about the consequences of giving in to hatred, prejudice, and blind obedience to a regime that sought to dehumanize and exterminate millions of innocent people. Her actions stand as a stark reminder of the darkest chapter in human history, urging future generations to uphold the values of compassion, justice, and the sanctity of human life. As we look back on the life of Irma Grese, we must also look forward, with a commitment to preserving the memories of those who suffered under her and countless others during the Holocaust. We owe it to the victims, the survivors, and future generations to never forget the horrors of that time, to confront hatred whenever it arises, and to stand united against the forces that seek to divide us. Irma Grese's story is a dark chapter in the book of human history, but it is one that we must continue to read, understand, and remember. Only by confronting the past can we ensure that such evil never takes root again. Thank you for watching this detailed account of Irma Grese's life on the Bio Network. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth biographies of iconic figures throughout history. Together, let's remember the lessons of the past and keep history alive.